Good afternoon and welcome to the Castle Morpeth planning meeting. Just before we start the meeting, I just want to mention that we are continuing to hold the meeting in a COVID-safe environment. So if you do need to get up at any point to either leave or go to the facilities, can I just ask if you have got a mask just to pop it on while you're walking around? Thank you. The meeting is available to view on live stream as usual through YouTube, Northumberland TV. Can I ask that everybody keeps their microphones on mute unless you're actually speaking? And could I remind members to turn their mobile phones off? So there's nothing more distracting than them going off during the meeting. So with that, can I go to apologies for absence, please?
Chair, it's procedure planning applications first.
It's one of those days. The procedure at the planning meetings. Apologies for that. First of all, we will introduce the application, and then I will check to make sure everybody has viewed the site visit videos. We will then have any updates and changes to recommendations, any information regarding the application and the presentation for members. We'll then move on to public speaking, and I understand we have 2 public speakers today. So they will have a chance up to 5 minutes each. And then we will move to questions to the planning officers from members. At that point, we will go to the debate after we have a proposal and a seconder for a motion. And at the end of the debate, we will then go to the vote. Thank you. So now, apologies for absence, please. Thank you.
Yes, we have Councillor Darwin, Councillor Dickinson, Councillor Jackson, Councillor Murphy and Councillor Towns.
Thank you. Do we have any from the floor? No. Great. And the minutes of the previous meeting, which was held on, there's 2 lots, Monday the 8th of November and Monday the 10th of January as circulated. Can we agree those as a true record, please?
Great.
Fantastic, thank you. And then disclosure of members' interests. Councillor Bainan.
Yes, Chair. On the planning application, declare a personal interest and will leave the meeting.
Thank you. Do we have any other declarations of members' interests, please? No. And on to item 5, which is the determination of planning applications. We have, I'll let Councillor Bainan leave. Okay, so we move on to application 20/02094/FUL, and that's to remove Greenkeepers compound and erection of 48 dwellings, including 10 affordable houses, plus upgrade of access road, electric substation, SUDS, domestic package treatment works, and domestic gas storage, with amended description. It's land northwest of Bergham Park Golf Club, Bergham Park, Felton, Northumberland. So at this point, can I just check everybody has watched the videos from the site visit? Yep, lovely, thank you. And with that, I'll pass over to Tamsin to present the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I do have a couple of updates, first of all. Firstly, I've received a note from Public Protection who've asked if I can update a couple of their conditions. The first one is condition number 18. So after not previously considered, I need to insert within any statement / report that has been received the approval of the planning authority, and then to remove the word additional And then after local planning authority, insert the written method statement must be written by a competent person. And then at the end of the condition to insert competent person has the same definition as defined within the National Planning Policy Framework. And then also I need to change condition 19 as well. So after I state no building shall be constructed, I need to add above damp-proof course level. And then after local planning authority to add the aforementioned report must also detail to the local planning authority's satisfaction how the annulus of service ducts will be sealed to prevent gas ingress into the living space of the dwelling furthermore. And then condition 20, after no building shall, I need to delete the word not. And then also the lead local flood authority have agreed to the amendment of condition 25. This is just a very slight amendment. So after where it states sustainable drainage systems, to insert for the dwelling to be occupied. That's all the updates. So moving on to the presentation now. Right, so this first slide shows the location of the site outlined in red. The slide on the left clearly shows the site's location west of the existing houses at Bergham Park, with those houses directly adjacent being large dwellings in substantial plots. So next to the site and just to the south are 8 existing holiday lodges there, which were permitted as part of a larger scheme back in 2010, although only partially built out. So the site is located to the northwest of the existing clubhouse, which is here. In the existing access and drive through the site used currently to access the golf club and holiday lets is also outlined in red, which is there. This will also be used for access to the site. So the land immediately around the site is the golf course. So the plan on the right and actually the next few slides help to show the location of the site in more context with its surrounding area. So this is particularly important for this application because the site is located in an open countryside and greenbelt location, which in turn is crucial in determining whether the principle of a development is acceptable. But in this case, there are what we consider to be other very special circumstances that need to be taken into account. So I'd like you to see where it is located in the open countryside and greenbelt in relation to other settlements. So in terms of its open countryside location, this location plan on the right clearly shows it is separated from any other village or settlement. So the site lies around 920 metres west of the A1. The closest village is Long Horsley, which is set approximately 2.8 kilometres to the southwest of the site. West Thurston and Felton lie approximately 3.5 kilometres to the northeast and to the other side of the A1. Northumberland Zoo and Bockenfield Country Park also lie to the other side of the A1. So this application site is therefore not located in a village or a settlement which has got services or shops that the residents can use on a daily basis. There are no services at Bergham Park either. There's just the golf club, which does not provide the services or shops that you would need for every day-to-day living. There is also no footpath along the road to Long Horsley, along this bottom road here, making it more desirable for people to travel by car from the site. As such, it is not considered that, as my report sets out, that the site is in an unsustainable location. It is in an unsustainable location, and it is very likely that people who would live at the site will use their cars to access every normal day-to-day facilities. And this is unless, as I said before, there are very special circumstances which would override the harm caused from this development being located here. So the second slide I've got here. So this is a satellite image of the site in the wider area. So the yellow arrow points to Bergham Park. So you can see it lies between the A1 and the A697, a bit closer to the A1. and these two roads are connected by the C137. You can see on there the actual greens of the golf course around there, and the other houses at Bergham Park. Second image. So this is a closer image of the site. You can see the golf course all around it, and the residential properties at Bergham Park. So the golf clubhouse is here. Right, so this is the location plan of the site, and I've got a satellite image of it too here. So this is the closest satellite image I do have of the site. So you can see the area is dispersed with areas of woodland. This is just another satellite image. So this is the site here. There. I've got the existing site plan. So the existing site plan shows the site as it currently is. You can see the holiday lodges just to the south of the site and the areas of woodland around. So as part of the application, some trees would need to be removed, but these are going to be mitigated against through further planting within the site as well. So now I've got the proposed site plan. So in terms of the proposal, the layout shows that the houses would be located within an internal estate road into roughly a boot-shaped development. We've got 21 dwellings which are proposed on the eastern side of the site, and 27 dwellings are proposed on the western side. As you can see, this will mean there's a higher density of housing compared to the existing houses at Bergham Park. So the dwellings will all have rear gardens where the majority would bound the edge of the site. 2 suds ponds, which are located here and here, are also proposed into 2 areas of open space as well. In addition, the applicant has agreed to add the play area on the site. So the layout includes 10 affordable houses, which are located centrally within the site. In addition to this, a habitat maintenance and management plan document has been produced, which covers the creation of species-rich grassland and management, pond creation and management, and woodland enhancement areas outside of the red line boundary to address the impacts on great crested newts and breeding birds, as well as provide an enhancement for biodiversity. So this will be tied through the Section 106, which will also secure education, healthcare and affordable housing. So this slide shows a selection of the 7 different house types that are proposed. All would be 2 stories with traditional styled windows and details including lintels and sills. The plans also show that the dwellings would be constructed of either brick or stone, although a condition will be attached to ensure that final materials are agreed. So the existing holiday homes on the site are constructed of stone and slate, and the properties at Bergham Park are also constructed of stone as well. So this is just an example of what a typical street scene will look like. Okay, so I'm showing this plan, as I mentioned previously, that this site is located in a greenbelt and open countryside location where we would not normally allow housing unless there are what we consider to be very special circumstances, which in this case we do consider there is. And that is, in this case, that there is a fallback position and that there are 2 extant planning permissions in place for this site, which the developer could build out now. So one is for 50 holiday lets, which was approved on the western side of the site here, and 8 of these have already been built out here. And the other extant permission is for 14 dwellings, which was permitted on the eastern side of the site. So this extant plan on the left shows you that the layout of the 2 extant permissions, which I wanted you to see compared to the layout that is now proposed for the 48 houses, which is the plan on the right. So in this case, the developer has submitted information that shows the now proposed development presents a 5% reduction in floor space and 20% reduction in volume compared to the total floor space and volume of the fallback permissions, which we consider that this reduces the impact on the openness of the greenbelt, and to a degree that our conclusion is that this amounts to a very special circumstance that outweighs the potential harm to the greenbelt by reason of its inappropriateness and any other harms, which in this case is its unsustainable location, and so justifies our recommendation of approval in this instance. Now I've just got some photographs of the site. So this is a photograph taken looking across the western side of the site where 27 dwellings are proposed. You can see the existing woodland around it in the existing holiday lodges that have been built here. And this is a photograph of the eastern side of the site beyond the trees, and this is the trees and shrubbery which bounds the residential properties of Bergham Park to the western side. And here are just a couple of photographs showing the access road which runs through the golf club, and this is the entrance from the C137 where access will be obtained to the site. And this is just the final photograph that you've already seen. Yep.
Chair, is it okay if I come in at this point and just add to that presentation?
Yep, that's fine.
Thank you. Okay, members, this is a highly unusual application, and it has been with us for some time while we've sought to establish the most appropriate way through on this. I want you just to think about three initially important elements of logic on this one, and to keep these in the back of your mind throughout this. Okay, the actual question of whether or not development will take place on this site is not what we're talking about today. There's an extant permission for holiday-related development, and the application is effectively to change that to conventional residential. Okay, we are not saying in any way that if this was a fresh application with no fallback behind it, that it would be supported because of the issues of Greenbelt, as Tamsin mentioned, and it isn't in accordance with open countryside policy in either the existing plan or the emerging new Northumberland local plan. Okay. The second point of logic is that this is Greenbelt, and we have looked whether to see whether there are very special circumstances or not. And as Tamsin has said, the very special circumstances are that there's a fallback position in terms of there's an existing plan permission that is capable of being implemented, and through the reductions in volume and footprint, that the harm has been reduced in strict Greenbelt terms by this new application. Okay. The third point of logic is the more difficult one. The third point of logic is that this permission was granted originally with the support of the parish council, explicitly on the basis of it being tourism-related development, holiday homes. Okay. At that time, it was made clear that a straight residential permission on this site would not be granted, and indeed, historically, applications for that had been refused. Okay. The position we're in now, and the report sets this out, is that the developer is saying that despite their best efforts, that this is not proving to be a good location for holiday accommodation. And they've provided a variety of evidence to support that, including that drawn from local agents who have confirmed that they are not requesting too high a rent or anything like that. Okay. So we need to think then of the question. Okay. Clearly, up and down the county, we grant residential type development for holiday homes that we would not normally allow to be converted into residential units, and indeed the parent permissions here come with conditions for the land in question about not being used for residential development. Equally though, and this is the other telling question, that given that the use is not in question, the Greenbelt impact issue has been addressed, is to what weight you want to put on the economic reality here, and that the developer is strongly contesting that the modern market is not suitable for holiday homes in this location, and that residential development would be more appropriate and more successful in terms of development. Finally, I just have to keep in the back of your mind that we are seeing a huge growth in the level of what's called staycation in the county. So there is a very high level of demand for holiday homes in much of the county. So you are entitled to do one of two things, as you are with all applications. You could approve this, subject to conditions recommended, or if you refused it, you would have to be refusing on the basis that the principle of this being granted originally for holiday-related uses should be sacrosanct, and that it should be refused in terms of the proposal to convert it into conventional residential development. To finish on, nobody is saying in this committee report that this is an ideal location, either under former or forthcoming planning policy for residential development. And this is why this one is so unusual, but there are lots of background history to this site, and that is a definite fallback for development. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that. We now move on to our public speaking, and the first speaker will be an objector, Constance Bell. Your 5 minutes will start as soon as you start to speak. Thank you.
Thank you very much, members, for the opportunity to address you about this application. I'm here to speak an objection, and I represent some local residents, Kirsty and Tony Wells, Rebecca and Brian Alcock, who are extremely concerned about what's proposed here. I'll get straight to the heart of the issue. So the question really before you today is whether what's proposed constitutes very special circumstances. The proposals in the Greenbelt, any harm to the Greenbelt must carry great weight, and the ordinary way of things is that Greenbelt land enjoys a high degree of protection in the planning system. Now, what's being said to you today is that the very special circumstances case is that there is a fallback, that there are 2 planning permissions already related to this site. And what's being said further is that what's proposed now is less harmful than that fallback, than those planning permissions. Just to take those points in turn, there are 3 points to consider, and I think they follow sequentially. The first question is whether or not there is in fact a fallback. The second question is, if there is a fallback, what weight should you attach to it? And the third question is, if you think there is a fallback to which you can attach weight, does it make good the applicant's argument? Is it the case that the fallback is in fact less harmful? Is it the case that what's proposed now is in fact less harmful to Greenbelt openness than the fallback? So I do respectfully have to disagree with the comments that were made in opening by officers, where it was advised that whether or not development takes place is in fact not what we're talking about, because in fact that is to some extent what we're talking about for reasons I'm going to explain. So the first question is this a fallback? And the law says that to be a fallback, something must be more than a mere possibility or merely theoretical. Now, the difficulty that the applicant has here is that they've previously advised that they have difficulties producing a viable scheme on the basis of those extant permissions. They've previously advised through their agent Savills that there's concerns about the extant schemes returning sufficient funds to the golf course to fund the relevant improvements that were originally proposed. Now, if that's the case, it might very well be said that in fact what's said here doesn't amount to a fallback in legal terms because it's not really a mere possibility. Members will, of course, recall that these permissions were granted in 2010, some 8 are built out, so it's certainly arguable on the face of things that, in fact, really, these permissions aren't going anywhere, that things are going to stop here if you don't grant this permission today, because what's previously proposed isn't workable. But supposing you're not persuaded by that, and you think, no, I think these are a fallback, that they're more than a mere possibility. Well, the conversation doesn't stop there, because you still have to consider what weight you should give to the fallback. And when you're considering what weight to give to it, you can consider how likely it is that that fallback is going to come forward. So you might think it's possible that the fallback comes forward, but it's not likely. It might think, sort of 5%, it's not inconceivable that it could happen, but it's not, more than 50% that it's going to happen, because these permissions are very long in the tooth and there's evidence to say they're not viable. So you could say, yes, there's a fallback here, but I don't give it substantial weight. You could also say, there's a fallback here, but I don't give it substantial weight because I give substantial weight to something else, namely protecting the green belt from harm to openness, and also sustainability concerns. This is a council who has declared a climate emergency, who said that they have ambitions to cut carbon in half, net carbon footprint in half by 2025. That's a remarkable aspiration and a commendable one, but it's not one that sits comfortably with the concept of granting this permission. So that might be another reason why you give very limited weight to this fallback, because you give appreciable weight to sustainability concerns instead, or to openness, harm to openness. Or even you could say the harm that arises from design. If you don't like the way the scheme is designed, my clients have concern about the nature of what's proposed here being outkeeping with the rest of the construction materials and properties at Bergen Park. And finally, you have the question of, if you're against me and you think, no, there is a fallback, I'm going to give it significant weight, there's one final matter, which is it actually true?
That's 5 minutes.
That this fallback causes
Thank you
less
very
harm to
much. I
openness?
have to ask you to stop there. Thank you. We now move on to the public speaker supporter, which is Richard Sagar from Walker Morris, acting for Cousins. Again, your 5 minutes start as soon as you begin to speak. Thank you.
Thank you. There is a simple logic as to why this application should be approved as recommended by officers. There are, as you've already heard, 2 live planning permissions, and they've been implemented and they can be carried out at any time. One allows another 42 homes to be built, which are holiday homes, but they are permanent properties and they will be indistinguishable from ordinary homes. The other allows 14 executive homes to be built. In comparison to those, the proposals will result in a reduced impact on the openness of the Greenbelt and the countryside. The beneficial effects on the Greenbelt caused by the proposals in comparison to the live permissions should be given substantial weight in favour of approval. Just as harm to the Greenbelt should be given substantial weight, so should improvement, and that is what this proposal delivers. Comparing the live permissions and the current proposals, the live permissions are for 56 properties. The application is for 48, a reduction of 8 units or 14%. The footprint is reduced by 5%. The scale of the buildings is reduced by 20% when height and footprint is taken in combination. In other words, the volume of the built form. The 2-storey space is reduced by 28%. The site isn't seen in medium and longer distance views, but it is seen close up, and there will be a material improvement to openness, both visually and spatially, in those views. The differences in use will be very modest. Your officers have considered this very carefully and come to a very reasoned view on the matter. As to viability of those live permissions, in other words, whether they will or could happen, it's agreed by the objector that a fallback doesn't need to be certain. In law, a possibility will suffice. It's agreed by all that the live permissions have no legal or planning impediment to them being carried out. The cost of building future holiday homes can be adjusted to ensure that they are deliverable. It is clear to all that over the past 2 years, since the Savills report that my friend was referring you to, demand for UK holiday accommodation has increased, both to rent and to buy. Northumberland is no exception. The market is fundamentally different to 2 years ago. The golf club owners have a current interest in the holiday accommodation. Mr. Armstrong is sat here and can confirm that if needs be. They could sell those remaining 42 units. There is a clear fallback position. The viability of the 14 large executive homes can't really be in doubt. The existing executive homes, where the objectors mostly live, are testament to that. The value of housing of all types is rising faster than the cost of building it. However, the golf club owners support the Cousins application because it will provide a better return. They are the party that will receive the receipt from the sales of the land. The golf club has clear plans to invest and deliver improvements. It prefers the Cousins scheme, and that will be more sustainable and better financial future for the club. Planning decisions do have to be made in accordance with the development plan, unless there are considerations that indicate otherwise, but reducing the harm to the greenbelt by increasing the openness is a highly material consideration and of great weight. Openness is the most fundamental matter to consider in planning terms in the greenbelt. There is consequently ample basis for considering that the improvements to openness, compared to the fallback, which is very real, very live, amounts to very special circumstances. And this is a one-off instance. It's not easily repeatable. It relates to the unique circumstances of those permissions that already exist. Your officers have carefully assessed all of this, and they have taken legal advice in relation to fallback and all the circumstances that are set out in the officer's report. The judgment is to be fully endorsed. The reason for granting the previous planning permissions is nothing to the fact that they exist. They are live, they are implementable, and there is every prospect that development will proceed in accordance with them. Finally, in relation to issues of sustainability, the site is where it is. It is where it is, whether it is developed for the remaining 56 units, 14 of which executive homes, the balance holiday accommodation, or whether it's developed for another form of housing as proposed by this application. There will be movement, most likely, yes, by car, but in both eventualities, with holiday makers almost certainly travelling by car to a wide variety of various destinations. My client's position is that officers have done an absolutely thorough job.
That's your 5 minutes.
Thank
For
you
many
very
years
much.
to get this right. Thank you very much.
Okay, now I'll open it up to members to ask questions of the officers. Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you very much. As the local member for this area, I remember, I'm ashamed to say, the original planning application that was to build a golf course and to allow executive houses to be built in order to enable that development. I also remember the application for this one, which was entirely down to providing more tourism opportunities to allow the golf club to do better. So I suppose the first question is, have we ever, the only reason it was allowed was because it was for tourism opportunities. Have we ever changed in the history of this county council, for example, since 2008, have we ever changed a permission for tourism occupation only to allow those to be sold and made and make significant profits out of? That's the first question. The second question is, if this application was successful, why is there no payment for roads maintenance? Because there will be clearly significant damage caused to the roads by this developer. And then thirdly, the point about affordable homes, could we just have a little bit more on what that actually means, please? Thank you.
Thanks, Chair, through you. Councillor Sanderson, this application that, the application that this scheme is hooked on was unambiguously related to holiday accommodation, and the argument was made and supported by a range of people that it would be good for the county's tourism economy and the golf course. The consideration was that at the time there was a very clear position from the authority that it wasn't for general residential uses, so conditions were put on to limit it to only be for holiday accommodation. So it was based on that, and it was conditioned that. So the purpose of the authority was absolutely clear. In terms of large-scale development, for example, caravan parks, etc., or lodge parks, we normally resist applications for conversion of holiday lets into residential lets. And indeed, in the past, some of the district plans said that you can potentially grant holiday developments where you would not grant conventional residential. Okay, there may be cases in the history where we've allowed individual properties that were built as holiday lets to become permanent residents, because anyone is entitled to put an application in to change that if something is not working as a holiday let. This is unusual because of the scale. Okay. In terms of highways, there will be a section 106 required as part of the scheme, and we will look at that if it is necessary, but we have a fairly strict set of criteria about where we can ask for either abnormal highway wear issues over and above the works that we would normally secure by highways agreements for works in the highway or to adoptable standard within the development. In terms of affordable housing, there has been some debate about whether on-site or off-site contributions. In this location, because of the difficulty in securing sites in the area, it was felt that the most robust way of actually securing affordable housing was for on-site affordable. So we've gone that way. Can you tell us what the mix or type is, or is that to be agreed still?
No, it's... Right. So they're all going to be shared ownership houses, actually? Yeah.
Yeah, and that will have been through our affordable housing team to confirm that there is a market and need in the area for that style of tenure. Thanks.
Okay, can I just come back on those for a second then? So we're talking, because the reason I asked the question is the paragraph isn't terribly, the 7.55 doesn't tell you a great deal about the financial implications and what affordable housing actually means and what does it mean in this context. But I suppose my main concern is, if this was allowed, and whether it was 1 or 21 houses that were agreed only because of the tourism point, we just wrote those off today and said you can build a house there and sell it. What would the implications be for us going forward? And I would respectfully suggest I don't think there are very many, if any, in the history of the council that we've agreed this. And what would be the implications of taking this significant step today?
Okay. I think the starting point on this is to fall back on the old concept that every site is different and every combination of circumstances is different. However, you are right to point out that when this was originally granted, it unambiguously was only granted to be tourism-related development, and that was backed up by conditions. Okay. I think it's possible to question the logic and the robustness of that original decision. However, though, we are not here to do that, because that is a permission that is lawful and it's extant. So that was my first point of logic. We are not discussing whether or not development will take place on here. It's the change in that development. In terms of planning decisions, there isn't what you call the general rule of precedent. However, a local authority in discharging its planning functions can be capable of making challengeable decisions if the consistency is driven by an unreasonable weighting on issues. By that I mean that if we were placing a unreasonable weight on the positive side of the column as against the negative side, or the converse was true. Okay, so that's why this one, that we need to be really clear to what we're accepting as weight and to what factors we aren't. So I would advise members in itself, with making a decision today, not to place weight on the economic benefit to the golf course, even though that was explicitly mentioned in the earlier decision. So members need to look at the issue of the fallback, and both speakers have spoken about what weight should be placed on that, and then the harm to the green belt, and then finally the issue of the approach of granting holiday-related uses on this site versus converting it to entirely into residential. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Sorry, I haven't had a
Councillor
response.
Sanderson, can I move on to this?
Well, I asked two questions. I asked a question about the affordable housing, paragraph 7.55. Can I have an answer to that, or do you want me to come back on it later on?
Tamsin, would you use your microphone, please?
Yeah. Yes, actually, I've got it in my report here. As such, it's recommended that all 10 offer shared ownership, with the expectation that one of the registered providers will be interested in purchasing one of them. But I don't. I've got the paragraphs from 7.46 to 7.55 that goes through the policies. But this is all I've got in terms of what we're asking for.
Yeah. So what Tamsin is saying, Councillor Sanderson, is that the details of who will be the other party and in terms of the shared ownership and the percentage of that shared ownership will be worked out as part of the Section 106 process if members were minded to support it.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Can I go to Councillor Jones, please?
Thank you. Can I just ask, the officer said that there weren't any services to the site, and the nearest services presumably would be Long Horsley. Could I ask, first of all, is there a bus to Long Horsley at all? And on the road to Long Horsley, I think they said there was no paving. I would assume there wouldn't be anyway. What is the speed limit along that road? And then the second question is, are we able to give any comparison between the cost to the council of services and maintenance provided to holiday homes or as opposed to full-time permanent residential, a family living permanently residential home?
Yeah. In terms of the bus service, I've Googled this and I've searched and I can't find that there is a bus service along that road. And yes, you're right, there's just there's no footpath along that road as well. What was the other question about the speed limit? I think it's national speed limit along there.
And in terms of your question, Councillor Jones, about the costs of delivering local authority services there, for example, waste collection, etc., those are themselves, I suggest, in terms of this application, I don't think you should place weight on that at the moment, rather than just to accept the fact that any form of development on there would be not ideally located in terms of services. So that is true, though, of holiday lets or permanent occupation. Okay.
Councillor Dodd.
Yeah. What is extinct, and what weight does it carry? Because I always thought if something was extinct, it's gone. No?
No. By the term extant, we mean it's in force still. If a permission is granted and no development takes place, after 3 years, it will lapse. Okay, if it's implemented, it's regarded as being extant and still in force, and this permission for this has been based on in terms of the holiday accommodation is extant and still in force, so it is capable of being implemented, and that's why we then move on to the logic of it becomes a fallback position. In other words, it becomes by fallback we mean if this scheme was refused, then you have to have in the back of your mind that something else could be delivered, and both the public speakers have articulated their views as to the likelihood of an alternative scheme, which is the original scheme actually being built out and coming forward.
Yeah. The second question is, how, I don't know who wrote a report or whatever that said holiday accommodation isn't working there when the majority of it's not even built. So whoever wrote that, and we all know that, you know, planes on, and I know this is a question, but who wrote that, and is it part of who pays the ferryman?
Before you come in, can I just mention there's a few who've still got your microphones on, so it didn't actually pick.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. What's been tabled to us and triangulated with the views of letting agents who have a idea of the market at the moment is that the schemes, the holiday homes for sale for a long time were pushed, but there was a very, very slow uptake of those. So effectively the site's been built out at the rate there's been demand for it, is the argument. And so hence there's only a very limited number of part of the site's been built out so far, because despite marketing it, the argument is that that marketing hasn't been successful. There is an argument, I recognise where you're coming from on this. You could say, well, they should build it out in its entirety, then see how it goes. What members need to ask themselves is if the evidence that they've got to hand so far suggests that the site hasn't worked to date, is it reasonable to get the developer to build out something explicitly aimed at holiday homes if they are saying it won't work? Because then you'd be left with homes that weren't ideal for conversion into residential properties. Or do you accept the argument of the developer that it is better to cut the losses, if you will, on the holiday accommodation and just replace it with residential? And you are entitled to take the view that this was granted as holiday accommodation and should stay that way because you are not convinced of the argument, or that you accept the argument and it is reasonable to support residential growth in the county to allow it to be converted into conventional residential development. That's the heart of the question you're faced with.
Thank you. Councillor Jones.
Yes, I'm sorry, I might just be confused here. I just wondered what was your basis on saying that there's no market and now it's not, when we were told in public speaking that extant application could be built out straight away.
Yeah, and this is the question, is that what the developer is saying is that actually at the moment, with the circumstances in this site, is that the viability such that to make this work as a commercial proposition for holiday development is a much narrower margin, and they've tried in the past and have had a lack of success, but it is capable of being built out, and given the growth of holiday pressure in this county, it may well work. But they've been, from their perspective, and I can confirm that they've been fairly consistent over this issue for the last 2 years, that they've had difficulty with this site, and they are saying that to give you a better quality of development in their perspective, it makes more economic sense to say to go for residential development here. Okay, I don't think it's not as cut and dry, because clearly, I think we all need to accept this, is that the developer cannot have cake and eat it on this front, cannot say it won't work as holiday accommodation and say it's a fallback. Okay, And that's an important thing to keep in your mind as well, okay? Thank you.
Thanks, Rob. Councillor Wearmouth.
Thank you, Chair. I've got 3 questions, I think. I'll ask them and then Rob can each in turn. So the first one's just on openness. And so I'm just wondering how we actually define openness, because it's all well and good to say there's less floor space, but actually looking at the 2 designs that are in front of me, I'm slightly gobsmacked, if I'm honest, to say that the one on the right is the one that's more open when it looks like a street scene in any town or village, compared to something that on the left-hand side, okay, it's taking more space as a floor plan. It may even be a little bit taller, I don't know, because I haven't seen the extant plans, but it looks more open.
And that's a very good question, Councillor Wearmouth, and that is something that, yes. What you are saying really is that the new proposals are very clearly residential development that you may see in any moderately low density part of suburban development. So therefore it is, for the want of a better word, urbanisation, okay? And that clearly then, in one's mind, triggers certain perceptions about its impact on openness. However, openness in a greenbelt context is a combination of a lot of factors, because it isn't just purely on visual impact or visibility, because there's the argument that if you had a small site of one house hidden by trees and you couldn't see it from anywhere, building a house on it would still affect openness, okay? The issue here is that the built form under the holiday permission is using properties aimed at the holiday market, so they are smaller, whereas the new scheme, I think, is an honest interpretation of what the actual built form will look like, and clearly then you are using larger houses and with some of the more, let's say, residential clutter, almost, you could say, and that's not the right word, perhaps a paraphernalia that goes with residential development, so it looks more built out. But when you actually look at it, though, in terms of its technical effect on openness, there is less of a footprint there and less of a volume there of built form. It is not an easy one to answer this, and we've been pushing back with the developer for them to demonstrate the reduction in harm, and that is the end product of that. Okay. Okay.
Thank you. Question number 2.
Thank you. So the next one is the balance of likelihood of development versus the openness benefits. So you're telling, devil's advocate, or however you want to put it, right, is that you're telling us that we're going to have less of an issue in terms of openness. We're going to reduce the impact on openness on the green belt because this scheme ultimately has less impact. However, what the developer seems to be telling us is that he can't build the scheme out, and so therefore, or won't be building the scheme out on the current basis in the shorter term. It may do one day. So, you know, it does. I think other questions have kind of touched on it, but how do you balance the probability of it not happening versus the certainty that it will happen, because this one will get built out? I have no doubt about it. I don't think the other one will.
Yeah, well, I think, and that equally is a question, is, and the case law on this, which we've sought advice on, isn't purely that technically you've got a piece of paper in your hand and you could build it out. It's got to be more than that. And clearly, the fact that this has started, and given the state of the holiday market in the county, it is possible, rather than being unlikely, that another developer may come along and say, okay, we will look to build holiday accommodation here. We do not know what quality we'll achieve in that. And equally though, we shouldn't be really debating that. We should say, is this fallback position capable of being developed, and is there a likelihood of it? You are faced with a difficult question here, because clearly it cannot be both things. It cannot be the case that it's going to be possible to build it out, and it's going to happen, and an uneconomic proposition to build it out, so therefore you go to residential. Okay. What the developer is saying is here, they're saying that it was, I think what the developer here is saying effectively, how to put words into people's mouths, is that this is not the right location for holiday homes in terms of the Northumberland market. Okay. You have to ask yourself, is that enough though to say, okay, we convert it to residential? Because as Councillor Sanderson said, similar arguments to a sliding scale potentially could be made elsewhere on this one. And just to keep bookending this, the former planning policy for this area, back in district days, did allow for the grant of holiday lets where you wouldn't let residential be built. And that was, in fact, refused earlier on in the history of this site. Thank you.
And question number 3, Councillor Wearmouth.
Last one, because I don't need a supplemental. It's helpful. Marketing. How do you? And it's maybe a slightly difficult question for you, Rob. I appreciate, or Tamsin. But how do you demonstrate actually that the marketing's been done? Because it's one thing. There's plenty of buildings in our town here with a sign outside that no one even looks up and says, "Oh, I wonder if I could put something up there." How? Is there, where's the for sale sign? Is it somewhere inside the golf club and you can't see it, or is it online, or and how much is it actively being chased and so on and so forth to demonstrate that?
Yeah, and that was one of the earlier questions that we put to the applicant, that has there been a genuine attempt to market and sell this as a tourist-related development, and has that taken place over a suitably long period of time? And they provided information, included information from agents, etc., such that how we would measure that normally, we accepted the fact it had been marketed. Okay. Clearly, you could say they could go away and try for another 2 years. But one could always say that you have to make a decision at one point. And the point is, they made the assertion that they'd marketed it and tried and provided information to back that up. Thank you.
Do we have any other questions, please? No? Okay. Do we have a proposal from any member, please? Don't all shout at once. Councillor Wearmouth, thank you.
It's a very interesting application, this. I tend not to agree with officers, I'm afraid, and I would move refusal, I think, on the following basis. But I think it'd be a fascinating one if it were taken to appeal, not that I'm inviting that on us. But I think that I'm not persuaded of the fact that that there's a benefit in terms of openness. I think that the reverse is the case. I don't think that the layout and the orientation of what's proposed necessarily leads to a benefit in terms of openness. I'm not persuaded that the likelihood, we're being told that the extant plans, that there's a challenge in building them out, and it doesn't seem that it might happen, or it will. I mean, ultimately, if it is going to be built out, we want to see that happen because we would like to see the holiday homes here. If it's not going to be, and we're not losing the openness of the green belt. That's how the argument goes in my mind, and it's not that I have anything in particular. It's development. Good luck to any developer wanting to develop something. But those are the two bits that I don't see it rising or falling on easily. And then I think the other bit is just in terms of there is something in terms of the sustainability, I suspect, of this site, which isn't next to. Okay, it's next to a number of houses, but in terms of even the affordable bit, we do want more affordable homes in the countryside, or in some of our smaller communities. But I'm not persuaded that this is the right location for that or other residential development, to be honest. We've got plenty of development going on around Long Horsley and so on that's providing this sort of accommodation, would be my points. And so I question the sustainability of it as well, Rob.
Chair, can I just seek a slot of clarification there? Councillor Wearmouth, so for your second point, just so all of the members know what they are asking questions on and debating, are you saying that the developer hasn't provided a sufficient argument to demonstrate that the scheme won't be deliverable as a holiday scheme?
I'm happy for it to be discussed subsequently in the debate. My point is that we're being told that we will save some of the openness of the green belt by implementing a scheme that's residential on the basis that the other scheme can't be implemented. That's a self-defeating argument as far as I'm concerned. And if it is the case that the other scheme can be built out, well, we'll go for it, because that's what was given planning permission whenever, and actually it accords with some of the aims of probably of the policy of the council, which is holiday homes and a holiday economy and a staycation economy that suits us, quite frankly. More homes in the middle of the countryside doesn't, in terms of policy.
Do we have a seconder for Councillor Wearmouth's motion? Thank you. We have got a seconder, Councillor Bourne. And the floor is now open for debate. Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you very much. I think I would like to just put in a little bit of positivity into this, because I think we need to remember why the houses that are there now were built, and they were built to enable the golf course and the tourism provision. And this one was agreed, the houses here were agreed in order to allow the golf club to flourish. And I think, Madam Chairman, I think that should still be at the top of our list. We want the golf club to flourish. It's a very fine golf club, and I would like us to strongly give that message that we would like that to flourish. This is not a question of people living there saying we don't want people living around us, we don't want any more houses. They say to me that we know that there are going to be holiday cottages, holiday homes built at some stage. What they're saying is, can't there be slightly a more imaginative scheme here that would perhaps build some holiday homes and perhaps some houses to sell that would help justify and pay for those? Councillor Wearmouth is right. There is a huge development about to begin in Long Horsley. This developer himself has built a significant new development in Long Horsley recently. So my view is that a more imaginative scheme that would tick the boxes that I think we need to tick would be much more preferable. And finally, in terms of the argument that there isn't a market for holiday homes, that is frankly nonsense. You just need to look, for example, at the Forget-Me-Not caravan park. You need to look at some of these ones that are on here. They're expanding now. There is a huge demand for good quality holiday homes, holiday cottages and so on. And that is what I think we need to be trying to get. I think we need to get some enabling development to help pay for that potentially. And we need to ensure that the golf club flourishes. This one doesn't, in my view, at least tick any of those boxes.
Thank you, Councillor Sanderson. Councillor Dodd.
Yeah, I think I'm the only one that was actually on the plan committee when this went through in 2010. And if what is in front of us now had been put in front of us then, it would not have got through, because what did get through was very, very controversial and tight. 2 or 3 local members kicked up a fuss saying that this was going to be saving the golf club. It was very special circumstances. It was to help the golf club. Well, from my knowledge, the golf club went bust a few years ago. So I think all bets are off, and this is should be a brand new application. I quite like what I've heard from Councillor Sanderson, that if hybrid might do the trick. But to my mind, it wouldn't have got through, and it was very lucky that the one that did get through actually got through, because it flies in a lot of policies that we have. You know, I don't know how many golf clubs we've got, must be about 40 or 50 in the county. you know, I'm sure they would all look at this and think, oh, this will get us out of trouble. So, and I'm not convinced on the special circumstances. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dodd. Councillor Jones.
Thank you. Obviously, we can't see the future, but over the last couple of years, we've seen quite a few people moving out to the rural countryside as a nice place to live. But what we've found, and we do have experience of it, is that living in that rural countryside isn't quite as attractive when you haven't got the services. And what follows then, or has followed, and I'm not saying can't see the future, but a likelihood of a follow is, you know, well, we need a bus, and the road running past the site is a national speed limit road, and you know we've got children. We want to protect our children from that road. We want to protect our children possibly even from the A1 and access to the A1. You know, those things have to be taken into consideration when we're looking at building residential homes in a position like that. And I just wanted to say as well is, you know, if this is not viable for holiday lets, then you know it is a commercial decision to have planned to build them, and I'm not sure I see that it's Northumberland County Council's responsibility to change our planning policy to accommodate that, particularly in terms of, you know, what that might mean to us going forward.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Anyone else?
Can I just come in there if you don't mind, Chair? So just if we were going to move on to the vote, I just wanted to go through the reasons as the proposal's been seconded, because obviously the planners will need to have robust reasons for refusal. I'd made some notes and I just wanted to go through to make sure that that would be acceptable. So you talked about the openness. The site was considered as being located in an area of open countryside and so is not considered a suitable location for the development. That would be in contrary to our local plan policies C1 and H16, the Thurston Neighbourhood Plan Policy 2 and paragraph 80 of the NPPF. Please, anybody feel free to come in.
So thank you on that. It's more as well though. It's more significant than that, in that it's the balance between the openness bit. And so what was being suggested potentially was that there was a benefit in terms of the openness, and that created the very special circumstance.
Yes.
I genuinely don't feel that the plans in front of me have a significant change in terms of openness. If anything, I feel that they potentially make it worse, and certainly don't merit the words very special circumstance.
Yep. Well, I was going to come on to the green belt and then the very... that's okay. I know it's important that the reasons do come from yourselves. I had just written these down so that planners had something. Tamsin, feel free to come in, or Rob at any point. With regards to the very special circumstances, it said that you didn't consider that the very special circumstances exist, which clearly outweigh the potential harm that could be caused to the green belt by the proposed development. Would that go some way to...
That's sufficient, yes. And the plans don't create an additional special circumstance when contrasted with the extant permissions. I think it's important to say, because that's really the nub of what's been put to us in the report and by the applicant.
Rob or Tamsin, do you have anything?
Yeah, so something like that. Yeah, the proposal is considered to be an appropriate form of development in the green belt, where no very special circumstances exist that outweigh the harm. Something. I can write something up, yeah.
I'm happy to delegate the finer nuance of the wording to the head of planning and Tamsin, if that is practical, in conjunction with the chair.
Are you wanting us to cover like the impact on the openness in the refusal reason as well? Because sometimes we do refer to that.
Yes.
Okay.
Just before we go any further, I did want to come in and say something as well. It has been covered generally, but I agree about the special circumstances, because to me, to bring this application forward says there's enough doubt about the future of building holiday homes. Therefore, do those special circumstances exist that about the harm to the green belt? Because if there's a good chance that they may not be built in the first place, then there may not be a reduction in harm. It might actually be an increase in harm by approving this. And the other thing that gets me is if I go on holiday somewhere, I don't mind driving to go and get some shopping, etc. Tend not to need much healthcare when I'm on holiday. I don't need the schools when I'm on holiday. So I don't mind the fact that we've got to jump in the car and go and, go to the shops, go to attractions, whatever. Where I live, I like to be able to have good access to schools that will cover a child right through from primary up to secondary, and even further education. I certainly want easier access to shops, particularly given that more rural areas tend to be plagued a bit more with the bad weather, with snow and bad conditions, and good access to healthcare. And I do worry with this being kind of away from your towns, that we would normally, from experience with other applications, we've normally refused them on this basis. So to approve one when those situations exist where we would normally not approve them kind of flies in the face for me, and I wouldn't be comfortable in doing that. So that's my bit with that. Does anybody else want to add anything before I ask the proposer to sum up? No? Councillor Wearmouth, would you like to sum up?
Can I just check our officers are you happy with the wording of what you've got before
Yes,
you to make sure that
the main points that we're going to base the decision on is openness, unsuitability of the location, the development in the green belt, and then the very special circumstances, and the precise wordings to be agreed with officers and then shared.
Thank you.
So we have two reasons for refusal. One covers the green belt and one covers the open countryside and its unsustainable location.
Yeah, absolutely.
Two separate ones.
Yeah, happy for that. I think that captures everything. It's a really interesting discussion and an interesting project. And certainly I would like to just add to what Councillor Sanderson said, which is I really wish the golf club well, and I'm sure that this isn't necessarily the outcome that they would want, but ultimately I think that we need to base things in terms of our plan and what we've got before us. I don't think quite accords with what I would read that to be. So I don't have anything additional to add to that. Thank you.
Thank you. So we've had the proposal even to refuse permission on the grounds that you've just heard. That proposal has been seconded. We have debated the issue, so we will now move to the vote. Can I just ask you, keep your hands up until you've been counted so that we get accurate figures. So those in favour of the motion to refuse, please raise your hands. That's unanimous.
Unanimous.
But I'll go through the process. Anyone against? Any abstentions? Thank you very much. We then move on to appeals updates, which are there for information purposes. Does anybody want to speak on anything there? No. And then we go on to the local transport plan programme for 22-23. Is this just to note?
No, Chair, David Lawkes will be speaking on it.
Oh, he's outside, right.
Could we have a short recess? So
I was about to say, in that case, if we can take a short recess so officers who wish to leave can leave, and then we'll resume once David Lawkes is here. Can we just cut the live feed for a moment, please? Thank you. Okay, and welcome back after that short recess. Councillor Beenan would normally chair the meeting from here, but he isn't here at present. So I will move on to item 8 on his behalf, which is the Local Transport Plan Programme 2022 to 2023. And I believe David Lawkes is going to present this report. Thank you. Over to you, David.
Thank you, Chair. Just as introductions, I've got Andy Craig and Richard Mackenzie here with me as well, who are going to answer any detailed questions on the programme as well. The report sets out details of the draft Local Transport Plan Programme for 2022-2023 for your consideration and comment, along with the other local area councils, and prior to the finalisation of the programme for next financial year. We have yet to receive confirmation of the LTP allocation from the Department for Transport, but at this stage we've assumed that we will receive the same allocation that we received in 21-22, which is for nearly £23.5 million. Informally, DFT officials have told us that that is expected to be the case, and we should be receiving allocation letters in the next few weeks. The programme itself is split across 4 key areas: cycling and walking, safety, roads, and then bridges and landslips. We've drawn up the programme following a review of the maintenance needs of the highway asset, identified road safety issues and potential improvements to the highway and transport network, and we've included consideration of the priorities that were put forward by county councillors and town and parish councils towards the end of last year. The draft programme itself is set out in appendices A to D of the report, and in summary, that includes £1.3 million for walking and cycling, £2.1 million for safety, around £15.3 million for roads, and £4.7 million for bridges and structures. Just some key points to note. For walking and cycling, the allocations there are split between improvements for things such as crossings, footways, bus stop waiting areas, and also the design of the permanent pedestrianisation for Narrogate and Alnwick, which the pedestrianisation of that area has recently been agreed. Together also with maintenance of footways and cycleways and maintenance of the rights-of-way network. It should be noted that as well as the LTP allocations, there's also a proposed £1.5 million allocation within the council's draft 2022-23 capital budget, which is for development and delivery of walking and cycling schemes. So that's outside the LTP and on top of the LTP allocations that we're talking about today. In relation to that, the council's continuing with its initiative to produce local cycling and walking infrastructure plans, which we call LC whips, and they will be for the main towns in Northumberland, and it is expected that there will be consultation on those in the near future. We would note that a number of county councillors and town and parish councils put forward priorities for introduction of new cycleways and for footways, which were beyond the funding that would be available through the LTP capital programme. We haven't just ignored those have been captured separately, so they can be considered in future should sources of funding become available for them, whether that be from development, from that £1.5 million that we talked about of council funding, or for any future funding that comes forward from government specifically for cycling and walking. For the integrated transport improvement programme and funding generally, the most of that is concentrated on the safety programme. We've got programmes to improve road safety at high-risk sites, where there have been patterns of injury accidents over the past 3 years, and also other identified concern areas on rural and urban roads. And as well as other traffic management and speed reduction schemes, we'll also be continuing the programme of implementation of 20-mile-an-hour schemes outside schools. And we've allocated £500,000 in the programme for next financial year to complete that programme. For information, at the current time, we have completed 20 mile an hour schemes at 107 of the 161 schools where 20 mile an hour schemes are possible, with a further 10 that have been issued for construction and 44 are in the design process. So that programme now is progressing well, and we're moving towards the end of that, and that will be completed next financial year. We've also got a allocation within the programme of £350,000 for refurbishment and renewal of existing signage and the replenishment of existing road markings. And that's certainly an issue that is regularly raised with us by local members and town and parish councils. So allocation for that. The roads programme is very wide-ranging, entails a range of maintenance activities, including resurfacing, structural patching, surface dressing, microsurfacing, and together with allocations through the area offices for capital repairs for carriageways, structures, drainage, car parks and traffic signals. Again, this has been developed using our asset management principles and based on the knowledge of the condition of the highway asset. We should also note that in addition to that LTP programme, the council is also intending to invest separately a £2 million programme of highway maintenance investment in UNC roads and footways, and that is being considered at full council in a week or so's time. That's on top of the £15 million investment in UNC roads and footways that's been delivered over the past 2 years. So that's additional capital funding put in by the County Council on top of the LTP allocation that we get from government. Lastly, we have the Bridges, Structures and Landslips programme. The Bridges element consists of works to strengthen a number of our structures which are currently shown as under strength from the bridge assessments that we do, together with a further £500,000 allocation for further masonry repairs to Berwick Old Bridge as part of the ongoing phased refurbishment of that historic structure. We have a number of landslips that we're proposing to repair this year, with in particular a major scheme at Todstead on the B6344, Weldon Bridge to Rothbury Road. The overall cost of that project is going to be about £9.3 million, and that will be carried out over 2 years, with funding in 2022-23 of £1.863 million coming from local transport plan capital, but the council putting in a further £2.795 million out of county council capital. That landslip itself at Todstead is a really difficult issue to deal with. It's a very complex geotechnical failure of the valley. Difficult site because of the geotechnical properties, the artesian water pressures in the ground, the proximity of the river and the nature conservation designations at that point. So it will be a major scheme, large expenditure, but it will provide a long-term solution to movement that has taken place over many, many years at that location and which has really accelerated in the last few years. So hopefully that's given you an overview of the programme, and we would be happy to receive any comments that you have as the local area council that we can take back then and consider and discuss with the portfolio holder before the final LTP programme is signed off.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions? Yes, Councillor Dunn.
Yes, thank you. And sorry, Glenn, but I think I alluded to this question at the last Corporate Services and Economic Growth Scrutiny. When I looked at this, my first question was actually going to be whether Linemouth was in Castle Morpeth, because I couldn't find anything on here that mentioned the Linemouth ward at all. But there is something on page 102 here about schools. So I wonder if you could sort of just expand on that, David, what it is that would be happening at Linemouth School. Is that the 20 mile an hour limit that you were?
I think that's a safer streets for schools project. Richard, I don't know if you know any more on that one.
As far as I know, it's a safer streets for schools.
Which means?
Job, which is various different types of measures, signs, lines, that sort of thing, to emphasise that the school's there and improve the safety, and it's working with the school, and getting the kids involved doing things as well.
Right, so when will there be some more details about that? I know I've had various conversations with the head there about maybe closing one of the roads off.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing that will be.
Yeah.
I don't know, Liz, but I can find out for you when stuff might come through.
Right.
But obviously bear in mind if it's planned for next year, then we probably wouldn't be looking out till April anyway.
Right, okay. And obviously the big sort of query I had with this was the 405-004 footpath. I mean, currently there's improvement works going on to that from either side, from the Linton entrance to that footpath and then the Ellington. They're having to do it in two bits because the bridge in the middle is not very good. And the bridge in the middle was what we asked to go forward into this local transport plan, but unfortunately it's deemed not to be suitable. So I just can't understand how we can have an improved footpath at either end and something that's not very suitable in the middle, linking the two ends of the path. So I cannot see the reasoning behind the decision not to put that into the plan, and neither can the parish council, to be honest. So I would just like some clarification on that, and just to ask that it is reconsidered before the plan's finalised. Thank you.
Chair, if I just come back on that, clearly we are spending money this year because that was included within this year's local transport plan programme to carry out works to make some improvements to that footway. But it does just come down to, funding that's available, and then, where do we have to prioritise that funding to? So at this stage, it hasn't been included, because, that we didn't have the funding overall available that would have allowed us to include that, as well as all of the other things that we are doing in the programme. We'll certainly take back your comments, and we'll have a further think about it and talk to the portfolio holder about that one.
Yes, thanks, David. I would appreciate that. I mean, I'm just mindful that, there was external funding of 30k put into this path in the first instant. And, it was a general sort of understanding that in the next year, it would move forward. Now, it hasn't. And I just kind of see the point of having the path done at both ends, like I say, with a completely unsuitable bridge in the middle. So, yeah, if you could take that forward, that would be great.
Councillor Bourne.
Thank you, Chair. Just to commend the officers on an excellent report. It's very difficult. There's always schemes that we're all wanting that don't quite make the cut this year, but I think it's a good mixture, especially having the large amount we're investing in that particular landslip issue, which, if that gets that resolved, then obviously there'll be more funds going forward to deal with, bridges, structures and whatever, which is under Appendix D. And just to thank you for continuing with the endless Lancaster Park paths. Every year we get the 30 or 40 yards done. Eventually we'll get the whole estate finished, which is music to my ears because I get daily complaints about it. So thank you for including that.
Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you very much. First of all, could I request that it might be possible for officers to meet up with Councillor Dunn, ideally on a site visit, and maybe ask the portfolio holder to be present as well. Because if this work can be joined up and completed, it would seem logical and only fair to try and do that. So may I make that, first of all, a specific request? Secondly, I agree with Councillor Bourne about the landslip. I know that Councillor Thorne has made a lot of representations about the need to do this once and for all. It takes a big lot of money to do it, but I think it's the right thing to do. And then I think we're sort of half talking about making potentially a 2 or 3 year LTP, looking at that possibility anyway, and that would help, I think, if we did do that, to try and encourage more schemes and to bolster up confidence in people who are putting forward schemes, so that we know that if we can't do it this year, we'll put it into next year. So I know those discussions are going on, so hopefully we might look at that. The final thing is really about the traffic signs and road markings. I just think that, how much will 350,000 actually get us? in term, I mean, how much, for, you know, if a traffic sign's been knocked over or broken at the bottom because of rust, let's say an ordinary, you know, ordinary road sign, what does that cost to replace, approximately?
I think you'd be talking a few £100, but it does depend on where it is and what traffic management's required, etc. Councillor Sanderson. So, yeah, it's probably a few £100 for a normal traffic sign.
The reason I'm asking that rather annoying question is really because there are so many broken signs now, not just in our county. All counties have got the same problem, but I just think it would be good to see that 350,000 really get some bite and have some real impact, like the work we've done on our roads have had. I think we need to do that with the signs and lines as well. So I would just hope that parish and town councils will report to the area offices or online to report broken signs, and let's just see if we can get some more done in that. I know we could do with 3 million, never mind 300,000, but it would be really good to see some, you know, some real change happen, and if that means doing the job, I mean, do we, for example, do we make the signs ourselves, or could we get them done cheaper if we shopped around?
We do make the signs ourselves. We have our own sign shop, which is a very effective and good sign shop, and we're finding that in general it's more cost effective than when we've bought them in the past. So yes, we do that, and I take on board your point, and we'll see what we can do, Councillor Sanderson, to try and give that more emphasis, and you know, to try and really get some real difference on the signs and lines.
That's great. Can I just finish by saying I'm enormously grateful, as I think all members are, for the work that our frontline services have done in local services, and these gentlemen have done as well in producing this LTP. It's brilliant that, you know, the storms, COVID and everything else has not stopped the work happening. So I'm really grateful, you know, for all the work you do, and long may it continue. Thank you.
Councillor Jones.
Thank you. Could I just ask you about the work on the U and C roads? I've got certainly at least one road that's been in the draft LTP over 2 years running, never quite makes the final list. Will you be looking towards the draft LTP where people, you know, where schemes don't come high enough? Will you be looking at those when you first start on the U and C roads?
Yes, we're just looking at the moment what that programme might be for the UNC roads and footways with the extra £2 million that we're getting. But a starting point for that is looking at things that are sort of on the reserve list that haven't managed to get into the programme for this year. So we are looking at that, but that will be subject to discussion with senior management and portfolio holder to come up with the final proposals.
Anyone else? Councillor Wearmouth.
Thank you, Chair. It was just a question about the schools and you mentioned, David, a number of projects that would be forthcoming. I think it would be useful if you're able, I won't put you on the spot now to list them all, because and we could be here a while, because I think there was quite a few of them, but could something perhaps be circulated for this lack of set of councillors, so that we know which ones are on the list? Because, just giving an example, the one up at Abbey Fields is one that I often get asked about, and I'm kind of reassuring people that probably it's on the list and it'll be considered, and there'll be a design worked up potentially for it. But I'd like to know that I'm doing that with some degree of certainty that I'm actually correct. And I'm sure that others would similarly be getting similar approaches.
Yes, Councillor Wearmouth, we certainly can do that. We can send out a list to yourselves and possibly to all the other LACs as well, in terms of where we're at with the ones that are left to do. Abbey Fields is in design at the moment, so it will be coming out in the next few months.
Anyone else before I come in? No? Okay. I know we were very lucky to get that Stakeford A1147 scheme, for which I thank you. Absolutely brilliant, and it has slowed the speed down. And I do appreciate you have a mammoth task deciding which ones go into the scheme and which ones don't. But I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't say I'm disappointed Stakeford Lane didn't get included. Councillor Murphy and I were looking to put small schemes money in as well to get that road looked at, because the residents there have suffered for years, and I've been banging on about this for years, and it was only once the petition came in as a last-ditch resort to actually get a response and to get things moving that we actually started getting anywhere. And there's road markings going in. I don't know if it's before the council year end or if it's going to be in the next financial year, but there are road markings going in apparently which will fit in nicely with a traffic calming scheme. So the signs are going in, but the traffic calming's not, which is again disappointing. So I would appeal that before this is finalised, obviously to have another look, and I'll chance me luck with that one. And also Riverbank, again, that has come from a highways officer that the road is really, really bad. And certainly it was his words saying it's like being on a roller coaster. And it's as you drive along, your car is literally rocking side to side because the surface is now so uneven. There's obviously problems underneath. And he did admittedly say it's going to be an expensive job. But it really does need looking at, and particularly given that it's just, the whole estate's just been dug up for cables to be put back in, so it's even more of a patchwork quilt than it ever was. So again, just to appeal for that to be looked at, and if it's not included in the next one, again, an appeal for it to be included the year after, please. Thank you.
Certainly talk again about Stakeford Lane with Richard and etc. Riverside, I don't know, Andy, do you have any knowledge or anything to say on
I do, yes.
Riverside?
It was raised.
Yeah.
I do, yeah. It was raised as a priority last year, and it just didn't get included, just because where the line was drawn. Certainly, it'll be considered in the round of U and C roads for the additional 2 million.
Right.
So hopefully, it'll be included.
I will keep my fingers crossed and my toes and everything else. Thank you very much. Does anybody else want to ask any questions of officers? I think everybody's wanting to get home for Valentine's, aren't they? Councillor Dunn.
Yeah, just a really quick one. I mean, Richard, you'll be well aware that the traffic calming in Ellington is ongoing. But I'm going back to the point where this was raised from a petition for 20-mile-an-hour limits from residents, and that 20-mile-an-hour was knocked on the head. It wasn't thought feasible. Now, slightly frustrating that since then, we've seen a lot of schemes come up where people are asking for 20-mile-an-hour limits. And I would just like something in black and white, just to make it clear why that particular one wasn't suitable for 20-mile-an-hour, where I've seen one up for Sleekburn, for instance. Cresswell's got the 20-mile-an-hour. So just a clarification on that as to why we've gone down a different road. Excuse the pun.
Can you, which road exactly was that, Liz? And I'll find out for you.
Ellington.
Whereabouts in Ellington?
The whole front street.
So, right. I'll need to look into it.
Thank you.
Because I'll just be guessing if I try and answer why I didn't know. So if I can come back to you.
Okay, if that's everybody's questions asked, we'll move on to item 9, which is urgent business. I don't have any. So with that, I will close the meeting and thank you for attending. Good night.